to the Baghdad videotape that you showed earlier. The question is, should the United States go easily and readily into a general policy of assassinating people across the globe, wherever they may be? And the al-Awlaki case is pretty significant in terms of breaking through some of the final barriers. The issue that concerns many Americans, of course, is, hey, this guy's different. He's an American citizen. You can shoot others, but you can't shoot an American. We've got due process rights, etc. Well, that in a way highlights the whole problematic nature of targeted assassinations, because the fact that he's an American actually makes no difference in terms of the international law that's being invoked. No matter what nationality, you have certain due process rights under international law as well as domestic law. So if Americans have a great concern that an American should not be targeted without some sort of due process, why is it that that practice, that policy, can be applied to virtually anyone else? This
U.S.-born Muslim cleric, Anwar al-Awlaki, recently issued an audio message to American Muslims. This is a small part of what he had to say.
I, for one, was born in the U.S. and lived in the U.S. for 21 years. America was my home. I was a preacher of Islam involved in non-violent Islamic activism. However, with the American invasion of Iraq and continued U.S. aggression against Muslims, I could not reconcile between living in the U.S. and being a Muslim, and I eventually came to the conclusion that jihad against America is binding upon myself just as it is binding on every other able Muslim. I invite you to read the Book of Allah, the Quran. You do not have to take anyone's word for it. Decide for yourself whether it is the truth or not. To the Muslims in America, I have this to say. How can your conscience allow you to live in peaceful coexistence with a nation that is responsible for the tyranny and crimes committed against your own brothers and sisters? How can you have your loyalty to a government that is leading the war against Islam and Muslims?
That's the U.S.-born Muslim cleric, Anwar al-Awlaki. I'd like you to respond to that, and then very briefly, the WikiLeaks video footage that you saw and the implications of that. But this...
Well, clearly that's abhorrent to be calling for a jihad against the United States or against any country in that way. There's no question of that. But there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people who have made jihad calls against the United States. Where do we draw the line? There surely has to be some clear legal basis for singling this guy out, and then for engaging in a policy which, as we said before, is going to lead to the United States, perhaps the CIA, which is not actually covered by combatant status, and which would then be liable for murder charges if a CIA operative is arrested in Yemen and charges were pressed. It's a very dangerous policy, despite the abhorrent nature of the claim made by the cleric.
And the WikiLeaks footage, the U.S. military footage from the Apache helicopter that also captures the audio track of the soldiers laughing and talking about targeting these Iraqis below that happened to include 2 Iraqi Reuters employees. Would you call that assassination?
Well, it's horrendous footage. So forgive me for sort of extracting myself from the situation and being a little bit more analytical, as it were. The question is the United States government actually going to provide more details on the circumstances in which that engagement took place? The US government has said, but there was a combat situation going on. If that was true, then you give more leeway. But the US has not revealed other footage which would show that this was really in the heat of the moment. So if it wasn't in the heat of the moment, then you've got a situation where the helicopter comes in, sees a group of individuals, doesn't actually clarify whether they're carrying arms or behaving in any other suspicious way, and simply takes them out. That's very problematic. It then raises the question of what are the rules of engagement? Are they tight enough? Is the military actually following up with effective post-mortems in these situations? And, of course, finally, there are many allegations against the US military. We never really hear anything about the proceedings that actually take place. All we hear is a few lines at the end saying, no, we reviewed this and we decided not to press any charges. It's time that there was more transparency in relation to incidents where these sort of things happen, and there are serious concerns about the legality.
Should the UN investigate?
The UN would not be in a position to investigate without the full cooperation of the United States, and the UN's been calling on the US for a very long time to be much more transparent on these issues.
Philip Alston, we want to thank you for being with us, UN Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial, Summary, or Arbitrary Executions, and a professor at New York University. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.